Well, welcome to Chapter 5, Conversions and Scales. And you can see here that the adult llama is alpaca is a scale up with a baby. So section 5.1 is what we're covering in this video, and it's about converting units. And we're going to look back here at Chapter 1 just to get an idea of what we're really doing here. Chapter 1, we defined amount of something, numbers as the amount of something. And Chapter 2, we use number lines to represent that quantity. So here we're using number lines to represent roses and dozens of roses. So there's a dozen roses. So these are roses in the first number line, and these are dozens of roses in the second number line. Notice 0 roses is going to correspond to 0 dozens, whereas 1 dozen will correspond to 12 roses, so they are the same. They're lined up vertically. They represent the same underlying quantity. And here, 2 dozen roses, of course, is equal to 24 roses. So the number 1 on the number line up here, the number 1, represents different things. It represents 1 dozen, or it can represent 12 roses, right? So a conversion is a ratio indicating an equivalence of units. Like, for instance, the formal notation 1 foot is equivalent to 12 inches is typically written with an equal sign. So we're going to be converting units in this section. To convert units, we use the solution technique introduced in Chapter 4 on rates and ratios. So in this example, which you're not responsible for, but 5.2, we're using the conversion 1 dozen is equivalent to 12 roses, and we're going to try and find out 3 dozen is equivalent to how many roses. And we do it using what we used in Chapter 3. We just multiply the numerator and the denominator by 3, and we get 3 dozen is equal to 36 roses. These are equivalencies. In other words, 1 dozen is 12 roses, and 3 dozen is 36 roses, and 1 over 12 is the same as 3 over 36. They're proportional. And looking at it with the number line, we can see it this way, right? So if we wanted to find out here, if we have 1 dozen roses is the same as 12 roses, then 16 roses is the same as how many dozens, right? Now, there's nothing you can really multiply 12 by conveniently to get 16. So we use our fundamental technique of cross-multiplying and then dividing. And you can see that the number of dozens would be 4/3 of a dozen. And on the number line, we can look at it down here. 16 roses is the same as 4/3 of a dozen. And we're using this technique that we learned in Chapter 4 to make that. All right, so now we're going to go to our first example that you're responsible for. Okay, so here's our first example, 5.3a, and we're going to convert 4 miles into yards. Actually, we're going to fill out this table here. Now, the one thing I want to explain, this is a ratio table, is that each row represents the same quantities. So remember from our number line with roses, right? If I have 1 mile, that is the same as 5,280 feet. Okay? Or if I have 1 yard, that is the same as 3 feet. So we're going to fill this table out and find the equivalencies. In other words, 4 miles is equivalent to how many yards and is equivalent to how many feet. So let's start with what we know. We know we're going to change 4 miles into yards. and then into feet. Let's see what we have to work with. We have some conversions. We have this conversion here, 3 feet is 1 yard. And we have this conversion here, 1 mile is the same as 5,280 feet. So we could first convert miles into feet because we have a conversion for that. So I'm going to write out the conversion I have. I have 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet. So I could write that as a ratio this way. Or I could write it as a ratio this way. Just flip it. And it really doesn't matter which one of these you use in this given situation. So just pick one. So let's say we're going to use this one here, in which case I'll just simply erase this one. So now I'm going to set up a proportion, which is saying that these two ratios are going to be equal. And I have 4 miles from here, and I'm trying to find out how many feet. Now this one, I don't need to use our fundamental technique of cross multiply and divide. I can just simply multiply the numerator by 4 and the denominator by 4. 1 times 4 is 4, and 5,280 times 4, which we have a calculator, is, I got 21,120 feet. So I'm going to put that in here, 21,120. Now notice that this ratio is the same as this ratio. They are equivalent. But this would be 21,120 feet. Now we got to find out 4 miles is how many yards. Well, my conversion I have here, I have 1 yard is the same as 3 feet. So I can take 1 yard is the same as 3 feet. Therefore, how many yards is the same as 21,120 feet? Now, in this case, I don't know what to multiply 3 by to get 21,120, so I'm going to go back and use our fundamental technique of cross multiply and divide. Now, I'll get myself a little bit more room here. And so I'm going to get 3 times x equals 1 times 21,120. Divide both sides by 3. And I'm going to go to my calculator, divide this. And I get 7040. And that would be yards. So I could put that up here. And that's yards. So that's the example there, and this is how we use a ratio table for conversions. So in this example, we're going to fill in this table and make a number line for this table. And it says fill in a table and start with finding conversions. Well, the conversions are actually right here because the entire row is an equivalency. In other words, let me make up another example here just to make sure this is driven home. So let me say I have nickels, dimes, and quarters, right? So if I have 20 nickels, that's the same as 10 dimes, which is the same as 4 quarters. And I could even put dollars here, which would be the same as $1. So looking across a row, these are all equivalencies. In other words, they're the same underlying number with just different units. So these are equivalent. 1 kilogram is the same as 2.2 pounds, is the same as 35.3 ounces. So I'm actually going to put that up here. Kilograms. I'm going to have 1 kilogram here, and that's the same as 2.2 pounds, and that's the same as 35.3 ounces. And I'll try to draw straight lines as best I can. These are number lines. And of course, these are equivalent too, which makes sense. 0 kilograms is the same as 0 pounds, is the same as 0 ounces. Now, this is the conversion of weight, right? How much things weigh. You can convert between different units of weight. You can convert between different units of length, which these aren't, and you can convert between different units of area or different units of volume. But what you can't convert is like length, like 1 inch. You can't convert that to pounds. 5 inches. You can't convert it to pounds, right? You can only convert within whatever it is that you're measuring, right? So let's do this. Kilograms here. So I know that 1 kilogram is the same as 2.2 pounds. So I'm trying to find out how many kilograms is the same as 1 pound. So I'll cross multiply and I get 2.2 times x equals 1, right? Divide both sides by 2.2. Divide by 2.2, go on my calculator, and I get x equals 0.45, and that's the 2 decimal places. So I can put 0.45 here. And I actually can go down here and find a little less than half. 0.5 kilograms is the same as 1 pound. And now I want to find out how many ounces that is. So I know that 2.2 pounds, and let me erase this. I'm going to find out how many ounces there are in 1 pound. Well, my what I know is right here. I can use this, right? 2.2 pounds is equal to, it's the same as 35.3 ounces. So therefore, 1 pound is the same as how many ounces? Now, you can cross multiply and divide this, but there's another way of doing it. What if I say, let me divide the numerator by 2.2, and then I can divide the denominator by 2.2. And that is actually the number 1, 2. You're doing the same, basically, dividing by 2.2 is the same thing as multiplying. Dividing by 2.2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1 over 2.2. So, and then if that's 1 over 2.2 in the numerator, it's also 1 over 2.2 in the denominator, and then this number is just a more fancy form of 1. So I can do that. 2.2 divided by 2.2, any number divided by itself is 1, so all I have to do is take 35.3 and divide it by 2.2. Now, if you're not understanding this, you can cross multiply and divide. This is just a shortcut. So I'm taking this right here, and I'm going to get 16.01. So I can put that right here, 16.01. I can also, put it over, because these are all equivalent. Here, 16.01. Alright, so now I'm going to look at the bottom one here. I'm going to find this. I'm going to find this. So for this one here, let me erase that again. For this one here, right here, I have I'm going to go back to my original conversion here. I could go to this conversion, but I'm going to stick with 2.2 pounds is the same as 35.3 ounces. Therefore, how many pounds is the same as 1 ounce? Notice pounds, ounces, right? So in this case, I am going to go ahead and say, how do I go from 35.3 to 1? And the answer is divide by 35.3. This is the technique I used on the other one. I could just cross multiply and divide. So I'm going to divide the numerator by 35.3. And so I'll go on my calculator, and I'm getting 0.06. So 0.06 pounds is the same as 1 ounce, right? They weigh the same. Just as 2.2 pounds is the same as 35.3 ounces. So I'm going to put that in here, 0.06. So now I'm going to go down here and find 1 ounce here, about here. Here's 1 ounce. And that's the same as 0.06 pounds. And now I'm going to find out this last one here, which is kilograms. So I know the relationship between kilograms and ounces. The ratio is 1 kilogram is the same as 35.3 ounces. Therefore, how many kilograms is the same as 1 ounce? Now, how do I go from 35.3 to 1? No, it's right here again. Let me put that in red. How do I go from 35.3 to 1? I'm trying to make this quicker for you. And the answer is I divide by 35.3. And dividing by 35.3 is the same as multiplying by 1 over 35.3. So if I divide this denominator by 35.3, I can divide this numerator by 35.3 and not change just change the ratio, but still have an equivalency, right? So I'm going to go on my calculator, 1 divided by 35.3. And just for the sake of making this not too many decimals, I'm going to go to 2 decimal places and I get 0.03 rounded to the nearest hundredth. So now I can put that in here, 0.03, and put it up here, 0.03. So these are equivalent. They line up vertically on a number line, they're equivalent. Those are equivalent, those are equivalent, and those are equivalent. And importantly, each row is an equivalency. So this is 5.5a, only got 2 more left. I'm going to multiply or divide by powers of 10. Remember what that is? Here's an example. 13 times 100, that's the power of 10, would move the decimal 2 places. 13 divided by 100 would move the decimal 2 places the other way. So that's a refresh from chapter 3. So we're doing this with meters to kilometers, converting 2,300 meters to kilometers, and that's a measurement of length, right? So I'm going to measure length, grams to milligrams. This is measuring weight, and milliliters to liters. This is measuring volume. So you can convert between different lengths, you can convert between different weights, and you can convert between different volumes. But you can't, obviously you can't convert milliliters into milligrams, because you're trying to convert like a gallon of milk into the weight of something. That's not how it works, right? Or you can't convert liters, which is a measurement of volume, into meters, which is a measurement of length. So the standards in the metric system, which you don't have to memorize, I will always give you the conversions. The standards in the metric system for length, a meter is the standard. That's where you start from. And that's length. For weight, it's a gram. And for volume, it's a liter. Kilo means 1,000 of the basic unit, and milli means 1,000th of the basic unit. Just knowing this gives you a lot. So here's my conversions. 1 meter, or 1 kilo, 1,000 kilometers means 1,000 meters is the same as 1,000 meters. 1 kilometer is the same as 1,000 meters. 1,000 milliliters is the same as 1 liter. And 1,000 milligrams is the same as 1 gram. And you don't have to memorize these. I don't really memorize them. I just know these prefixes, the milli and the kilo. So let's take 2,300 meters. I'm going to find out how many kilometers that is, knowing my conversion of 1,000 meters equals 1 kilometer. Well, that's an X, right? I don't know how many. 2,300 meters is how many kilometers. I don't know that. But I do know, here's my conversion. So what I'm going to do here is simply, I'll cross multiply. 1,000 times X is 2,300. Divide by 1,000. Divide by 1,000, and you should be able to do this in your head. This is 3 tens. Dividing by 3 tens moves the decimal 3 places. So 2,300 meters is the same as 2.3 kilometers. Now let me erase this here. And let's do the next one, which it says 23 grams. I have my conversion here. 1,000 milligrams is the same as 1 gram. Therefore, 23 grams is the same as how many milligrams? Notice I don't need to, I could cross multiply and divide, but 1 to 23, you multiply by 23, so then you multiply the top by 23, and 23 times 1,000, hopefully you know, is 23,000. So 23,000 milligrams is the same thing as 23 grams. I'll erase that. We'll do the last one. I'll put that in here, and it's 2,300. And our last one is convert 32 milliliters to liters. Here's my conversion. And it doesn't matter what you put on the top. Let me put a liters on the top this time. 1 liter is the same as 1,000 milliliters. Therefore, how many liters is the same as 32 milliliters? Notice liters, milliliters, liters, millimeters. If you flip that around, you got to flip both of them. If you just flip one, it's not going to work. So this one looks like it's easiest to cross multiply and divide. I get, and that should be 32 times 1 is 32 equals 1,000 times x. Divide by 1,000. Divide by 1,000. 32 divided by 1,000 moves the decimal 3 places because that's 3 tens, right? So that would be 0.032. Liters is the same as 32 milliliters. Okay, here's our last example, and it says, and this is a good thing to keep in mind here. Whoops. And it says, not all relationships are proportional. The ones we're dealing with are. A good rule of thumb is the relationship is proportional. If you double one thing, the other thing also doubles. So just to show you that intuitively these are proportional, if 1 kilogram is the same as 1,000 grams, and then 2 kilograms would be the same as 2,000 grams. So conversions of this type are always proportional, but a lot of things in life are not proportional. So we're going to find out how many grams there are in 1.6 kilograms and how many ounces there are in 1.6 kilograms. And I'm using a number line here to show the relationship also, right? They are equivalent. 0 ounces is the same as 0 grams is the same as 0 kilograms. Those things line up vertically. Here's a relationship which is explored right here, right? So first I want to convert to grams. And I know that 1 kilogram is the same as 1,000 grams. So I'm going to put that up here. 1 kilogram is the same as 1,000 grams. Again, I just chose this arbitrarily. I could have written it 1,000 grams over 1 kilogram. But if I kept this, I better do this here, right? So here I know I have 1.6 kilograms, and I want to find out how many grams. Now, a quick way to do this is, how do I go from 1 to 1.6? Well, 1.6 times 1 is 1.6, so I can save myself from having to cross multiply and divide. So if I multiply the numerator by 1.6, I can multiply the denominator by 1.6, because 1.6 over 1.6 is 1, and if you multiply any number by 1, you get the same number back. So these will be equivalent ratios. 2 equivalent ratios form a proportion. So 1,000 times 1.6, move the decimal 3 places, I get 1,600. So what do I have there? 1,600. Let me write that in. So that's over here. 1.6 kilograms is the same as 1,600 grams. And for the last one I'm going to do, which is right here, I'm going to convert I can convert 1.6 kilograms into ounces, but I don't have a relationship for those. But I do have a relationship for grams into ounces. So I'm going to use this relationship here to solve for this. So I have 28.35 grams is the same as 1 ounce. So therefore 1,600 grams is the same as I don't know how many ounces. So this one I'm going to definitely cross multiply and divide. So I get 28.35 grams times X is the same as 1,600. Divide both sides by 28.35. Go on my calculator, and I get 56.4, rounded to 1 decimal, and that would be ounces, right? I'm going to put that on my number line here, 56.4. So these are all equivalent. In other words, 56.4 ounces is the same as 1,600 grams is the same as 1.6 kilograms. These are equivalent, and these are equivalent, and these are equivalent. And I just filled in a table. And then again, remember, it's the rows that give you the equivalencies. So this is problem number 2 in the homework. And it says draw the following. And an inch would just be drawing, a 1 inch. About like that. So that's 1 inch. It's a measurement of length. Now you can convert between measurements of length. For actually, like, you can change inches into centimeters, into meters, into yards, miles, etc., etc. All these things are the same. They're units of length. So you can convert between them. A square inch is 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. Just simply a square inch. So it's a square that it's an inch on each side. And it's a measurement of area. And you can convert between square inches, often written like this, inches squared, or square feet, or square meters. Notice the two-dimensional. That means inches times inches. It's a two-dimensional. And a cubic inch is a measurement of volume. And let me see if I can just draw some sort of an example. It's basically like a die. And so it'd be 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. So length, width, and height are all 1 inches. Let me try again. So you can make dice are a good thing. So volume is cubic. So let's talk about that. It's like an inch cubed means an inch times an inch times an inch. And you can convert, it's a measurement of volume. You can convert between that and even things like gallons or liters or pints or cups or cubic centimeters, because you can see with a cubic inch, it's really, you fill it up with something. So it's a measurement of volume. But you can't convert between inches and square inches. You can't convert between those two. And you can't convert between cubic inches and square inches, and you can't convert between volume and length. You can only convert within these particular areas. Here's number 3 in your book. And it says determine which conversions relationships are incorrect. Inches, feet. This one is correct, because we know that 12 inches equals 1 foot. I'm going to use that basic idea. There's a lot of ways to do this problem. I'm going to show you the long way and then the short way. So 12 inches equals 1 foot. So I can use that as a ratio. And then I could like say, okay, I'm going to use 41.4 inches. And if that's true, then how many feet would I have? I'm going to see if this here matches this here. So I'm going to cross multiply. And then divide by 12. And then go on my calculator and go 41.4 divided by 12. And I get 3.45, which is here. So that's correct. So let me show you a shortcut. I'm just going to take 82.6 inches and divide it by 6.8 feet. And what I should get, if this is a correct ratio of inches to feet, I should get 12 inches over 1 foot. The 1 I'm going to get automatically if I divide these two numbers. So let's go 82.6 over 6.8. And I get 12.1. 82.6 over 6.8. I get 12.15. So when I divide these two, I get 12.15, which of course you can put any number over 1. So that would be inches to feet. That's not correct. So there's two ways of doing it. So here is a table, and I'm going to do this one for you, and then maybe I'll explain this one. So we're going to complete the table. And so you can look in your notes and see what a conversion is. Probably the easiest one is centimeters to inches, and you're going to get 2.54 centimeters equals 1 inch. That's the conversion. So I'm going to write this 2.54 centimeters over 1 inch. Could I write 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters? Absolutely. As long as you keep these the same over here. Centimeters over inches. So I have 100 centimeters. I'm trying to find out how many inches. So probably the easiest way here is to cross multiply and divide. I get 2.54 times x inches equals 100 times 1, which is 100, divided by 2.54, divided by 2.54, and I'm going to get 100 divided by 2.54, put that on my calculator, and I get 39.37 to 2 decimals. So I can put that here, 39.37. Now I just want to make a note here for you that all these, 39.37 is the same length as 100 centimeters. It's the same length as 10 decimeters, and it's the same length as 1 meters. So when you look across a row, they're all the same. They're all equivalent. So for this one, I'm going to do, well, maybe I'll do this one first. And the relationship is 100 centa, meaning hundredth, equals 1 meter. And from this relationship, you ought to be able to get this. For this one, 1 meter equals 10 decimeters, because you have that right here. You don't even need to look. And so that's what you're doing. You're filling this out. Usually you're using cross multiply and divide. And so it says here that your heart beats 72 times per minute. How many times does it beat in an 80-year lifespan? It's sort of a preview of 5.2. So watch what I do. I'll get started here. I'm going to multiply this by 60 minutes and 1 hour. So these minutes are going to cancel. And if I multiply 72 times 60, I'm going to get how many beats this heart will beat in 1 hour. And then I don't want hours, I want the next unit up, which will be days. So there's 24 hours in 1 day. Like in fractions, the hours cancel, and if I multiply 72 times 60 times 24, I will get the number of beats over 1 day. And then there's 365 days in 1 year. And so the days will cancel. And if I multiply all these across, I will get how many beats in 1 year. So if I know how many beats in 1 year, what do I multiply it by to find the number of beats in 80 years? You can figure that one out.